Oh boy, alright, I'm back. Alright, it's been about a month or two since my last video. Yeah, I have not had anything interesting to share with you, really. No movies or books or games or anything that really stuck out to me. That's not necessarily true, actually. I've engaged in some cool activities. I just haven't gotten around to making a video for you. However, I really have read some good books lately, and I got like a good list, like a TBR, as they say, of books I want to read that I'm really interested in. So I think some more book reviews will be coming in the future. Feeling like I have some stuff to share with you now. Well, today we're going to talk about, as you can tell by the title, The Ruins by Scott Smith, which came out in 2006. I don't remember the publishing house, but there's also a film that came out in 2008. A lot of people have seen the movie. It seems almost seems like more people have seen the film than the book. I do remember when the book came out because I was in middle school at the time, pretty sure. And like a kid brought in the book to read, and the teacher was like, "You can't read that book," and I was like, I need to see that then. If I'm not allowed to read, if we're not allowed to read it, I want to read it. And then the movie came out, and I don't remember if I've seen it or not. I was thinking about that. Like it seemed familiar, but I'm just not sure. But I've always put this book off because it seemed to me, based on like clips I've seen from the movie and stuff, like it was gonna be like a generic slasher kind of film. Like, I do have a soft spot for like the early 2000s movies. They have that sort of vibe to them. But I was like, I don't know. I would say that this is like probably a literary fiction. I was totally not expecting that. And as always, like, you can argue as to if it is or isn't, of course, but I would say at the very least, it teeters the line between genre writing and literary writing, right? Because this book, it really did take me by surprise. There's such an emphasis on the characters here. There's such an emphasis on the feelings and the things that are going on. The plot, I mean, the stereotypical, at least for me and the way I judge things when I read a book to kind of tell if it's literary or not is like, did anything happen? Like when you read it, you're like, wow, not a lot happened. That's kind of a hint, at least sometimes, that it's a literary novel, at least for me, or like there's a huge focus on like character development and like seeing what's going through the characters' heads. And that is certainly what goes on in this book. I mean, if I'm to like list out all of the major things that happen in this novel, there's not a lot. It's a short novel. It's only about 360, 370 pages. I read it in 2 days. It's a quick read, but um, yeah, there's so much of like the characters just sitting around. And this is also um, like a one setting novel, right? It really takes place in like one major location, which I'm a fan of. I know some people don't care for, but like movies like Phone Booth or trying to think of some other one setting movies. None come to mind other than Phone Booth, but I really like that movie. But yeah, that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And also, really, from the first like 2 pages, the prose. I love prose. I love when there's a unique, interesting sort of prose. It can elevate a book for me when pulpy books are great too. I love them. When the prose is just totally there just to serve the purpose. But when you get an author who has a very unique writing style or a writing style that matches the tone of the book, it just elevates the book, in my opinion. Scott Smith's prose in this particular book is kind of reminded me in like of Stephen Graham Jones slightly, not to the extreme, but it had a very conversational sort of tone. Stephen Graham Jones's prose always feels like he's just telling you the story, and at times it's like stream of consciousness, like it just veers off. This doesn't go. This is tight prose, but it does have a conversational tone to it. The sentences are very short. They're not fragmented in the sense that it feels like poor writing. They're just short to the point. There's a very cold feel to the prose. I know that sounds like very weird and like hippie-ish of me to say, but the way he writes mirrors the book. It is very cold feeling. There's a sense of dread constantly. It's very cruel and just the book does not make you feel good. And the prose helps. So seeing that stylized prose within the first 2 pages, I was like, whoa, okay, this is going to be something worth checking out. Now, let's talk about some non spoiler stuff. I want to talk about like just the basic gist of this. You have like four people, like two couples. They're like young 20 somethings, graduate students. They meet up with some foreign people in Cancun. They're hanging out and partying. And one dude who's German, his name is Matthias. He's like, "Oh, my brother, he's went missing and he was doing this dig thing out in the jungle. You want to come with me and try to find them?" And of course they're like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And so they go, and then you can kind of imagine that some shit goes down. Some they're gonna get stuck there, right? Something bad's gonna happen. I'm not gonna tell you what, but something bad's gonna happen. And like I said, we're getting into this singular location kind of story. Um, so pros of this, the prose, prose. That's confusing. Really love the prose. I really love the characters. Now, the beginning of this novel, the characters, and this might be slight spoil. Everything is a spoiler, right? If you don't want to know anything about this, you wouldn't be watching this. But still, trying to remain spoiler free as best I can for you. Um, the characters in this book start out like generic horror movie characters, right? Like that have basically no personality. And then as the novel goes on, you start to see their personality. And like I said, a lot of this book is just waiting around. Like that's another, like I've probably already said this, but that's just another way for me to kind of tell like a lot of just sitting around and talking and explaining or thinking about their thoughts about what's going on, reminiscing on past experiences. A lot of that in this book. And it really does get you invested in the characters. They're not like, don't get me wrong, this is not like the most thought provoking novel ever written, right? This is not like a masterpiece or anything, but it is a superbly written book. It is really excellent. And I thought the character development was great. And I loved how, I think it was intentional how at the beginning of the book, like I said, boring, kind of really boring generic characters that slowly morph into something bigger. As you see, as the book goes on, this is not your standard kind of slasher horror, kind of movie book. Um, Although the setup of the book really is, the way it plays out is not. Um, yeah, it was just, I don't know, it was just excellent. The main thing with this book is, again, like in terms of plot. Again, it's a little bit light on plot. I tend to enjoy that when we get into these kind of books where the plot is more so the vehicle for the other things to happen. But it was great. There are some gross moments in here. I will say that as a warning, like there are some nasty things that happen in this book. Not a lot, like it is not a blood fest or anything, but it's pretty real. Like it's a pretty realistic esque kind of book. So you're gonna see and read some pretty gnarly things in here, and just some gross out things, but it's few and far in between, and it was as gross as it is and horrible as it is to say, kind of awesome to read. That's basically all I can say. Let me get into spoilers now. I mean, I totally recommend this. If you read this, let me know. I absolutely recommend this for horror fans. If you have not read it yet, I wish I had read it earlier. Like that's I guess the thing I could say if a novel is really good or not. I finish it, and I'm kind of angry. Like I could have read this book in 2006, right? I could have just went to the library and got it, and I had to wait this long to read it. But wow, 2006, 14, 17 years ago? My math is correct. Holy smokes. I could have read this book 17 years ago, but here we are. Okay, spoilers. So basically, if you don't know already, the deal with this book is it's vines, right? They basically go to these ruins, these Mayan ruins. And this is going to sound funny, but true. When I was reading this, I'm like thinking of the ruins. I'm thinking of a temple. Like I kept thinking like Tomb Raider or something, like they were going to go inside some temple. And they basically climb these ruined, like I guess ruins, but like they basically climb a hill that has a flat plateau at the top, and that's where they are the whole entire book, like the whole book. And I'm like, when are they going to go into the temple? The book never said there was a temple. I'm just in my head thinking that, right? So no, really, the ruins are just like what they are, like very, I can't even speak right now. Very dilapidated ruins with a plateau on top where they basically are camped out. And they go up there. They, of course, in a classic horror movie fashion, they have like a bunch of these Mayans like telling them do not go up there, but they have a language barrier and they're stupid. they're not listening, and they go up there, and once they get up there, they cannot come back down. The Mayans will not let them, and they quickly learn it's because there are these vines everywhere up there that are like infecting them and like trying to kill them. And they're not ever really sure why, but they just know that the Mayans are like, if you go up there, we don't want you infecting anything down here. So they basically, the Mayans camp out at the base of this hill the whole time they're up there, to make sure that they don't come down or they're gonna kill them. And as this novel goes on, and they start to like realize that like how intense like this plant is, and it starts doing things like crazy things. Now the first, like I said earlier, how I really did love how this book had very few like major elements to it. They were just like a major element and then a lot of like the characters, like how they felt about it. Like for instance, they try to go down in this mine shaft in the middle of the camp because they hear a cell phone ringing, and one of the dudes named Pablo, he's a Greek dude, him and two other Greek dudes that never showed up, that they're holding hope out for, that are going to show up and save them somehow. They go down there, and Pablo straight up breaks his back. He falls like 50 feet or something, breaks his back. And then there's this whole like, it's just, I don't know how to encapsulate how it made me feel, but like just getting Pablo out of that mine shaft, it was like 100 pages worth of material. And I remember reading it thinking like, it's interesting to read a horror novel like this where it just always feels like it's on the verge of going into like a generic slasher, but it's not, right? Like there is no slasher that's going to spend 100 pages like talking about them like building the rope to like makeshift rope to get this guy out of here, and building like a stretcher for him. It's really fascinating. I haven't read a book like this in a while where I can tell the author is toying with my preconceived conceptions of this thing. I guess My Heart is a Chainsaw, but that does it in such a grandiose, like almost comical way. This book is not funny. It's very serious and very disturbing and dark the whole time, because as soon as they get on that hill, nobody's making it out, right? Like there's no way they can get out of here. The only way they can do is just leave, and they're gonna get killed by the Mayans. So I found that very fascinating. Um, if you've read this book, then of course you know what happens to Pablo and his legs. But that was crazy. That was intense. But yeah, this thing they finally later get down there, and they find that there is no cell phone. That the flowers were mimicking the sound of the cell phone, and then the flowers are kind of laughing at them. The flowers on the vines, and then they kind of start to realize that it can kind of mimic human speech, which is very chilling when it starts doing it. And then it starts mimicking the smells of bread cooking, all sorts of weird shit. It freaked me out. Like I'm not a big like monster of the week kind of guy, or not a monster of the week, like creature feature, right? Like I'm not big into that kind of stuff. So when I said, oh, it's Killer Vines, I was like, I don't know, we'll see. But like, man, it really creeps me out. Like the just how chilling it was. These vines don't give a fuck, man. they were very brutal in the story. Yeah, so I'm kind of ranting now, but yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I found it fascinating again how the author was kind of playing with me. There was such a sense of desperation and like a loss of hope in this. Like there was the characters were always trying to cling on to the hope that these two Greek guys were going to show up and save them, even though one of the characters was like constantly like, what are they going to do? They're just going to walk up the hill and get stuck just like us. It's not going to happen. And seeing how the characters kind of gradually lose hope, right? And another thing I found fascinating was the character of Jeff. He had this complex of like wanting to be the one in charge, and they needed somebody in charge. Everyone that was up there was kind of starting to lose their wits pretty quickly. So Jeff was definitely necessary to, as a leader, to like, okay, we're going to ration our water, our food. We're going to do this, that. And he even mentions at one point, like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to like give us something to do to keep our minds off things. But then as the book goes on, there's a couple passages and things that happen. I started to kind of think like, maybe Jeff is more so the guy that just wants to be a hero. Like it's less that he's really actually genuinely wants to help everybody survive, but just he loves the satisfaction of like being the hero. I think we all know somebody like that in our lives that you just tell that they always want the limelight. They want to be that hero that does things. And then if you've read the book, you'll know that later in the book, Jeff kind of just tries to make a run for it. He just kind of abandons everyone at the end. And that really, he ends up getting shot, of course, and dies. But that really cued me into the fact that I don't think Jeff is that hero guy. I think he wants to be the hero. And that was a very fascinating thing. There are a couple characters that weren't written as well, particularly Eric and Stacy. Stacy was a slut, and I don't know if she really wasn't, but like that was her archetype, right? And then Eric was just, I don't really know what was up with Eric. Those two characters were okay, but to be honest with you, that didn't really distract me from the story. It was overall such a good product. And then you had the character of Amy, who was a wonderful, like, final girl who fucking dies. Like, I really wasn't expecting that. I really thought Amy was going to be the final girl and make it out, and she just dies. I totally was not expecting that. Yeah, I don't know. Fascinating novel. The ending was fantastic. I saw the ending coming a mile away, but I still loved it. Yeah, this was a great book. It was superb. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was wonderful. I would totally read it again. It's disturbing. It's very chilling. There's not a happy thing in this book. So if you're looking for something that has even a glimmer of happiness in it, don't read this. It is really more mature than I thought it was going to be. Just overall, in terms of the quality of writing, the professionalism of the prose, and just the excellent story, it's a total package for me. So I highly recommend this. Thanks for watching. Sorry I've been gone so long, but you know that's how it goes. I'll be back probably with I'm reading 2 things right now. Well, I actually just read some Philip Fracassi or Philip Fracassi. I do not know how to pronounce his name. I'm reading Mariana Enriquez. She wrote Tender is the Flesh. I'm reading one of her books of short stories, and I'm going to start reading Vineland by Thomas Pynchon, which is probably going to be a doozy, so that might be a bit of a project, but I'm looking forward to reading that. Going on a tangent, if you've seen the movie Inherent Vice, I really liked that. Also, Paul Thomas Anderson, based on the Pynchon novel. There's a lot of rumors that his next project is going to be an adaptation of Vineland, and there's some evidence to support that. I'm curious, so I was like, maybe I'll read Vineland. So that's all. Peace out. I hope you've been well, and have a great day.